What's up, guys? Welcome back. This is the Shirogorov 111 Arum Northern Wind. So this is part of a special edition series that they have done in the past for the F3 and now are doing for the 111 for each of the elements. And each one is in a different technocarbon color and a different steel. So the four in the series for the F3 were the Arum, which is just like this one with this blue and white technocarbo, the Ignis, which is the fire one, the aquatic, which is obviously the water one, and the terrace, which is the earth one. So each one in the series features different technocarbo, different steel, and some finishing details, as well as a bead that can only be acquired through one of these knives. So they're not selling the beads on the market. I still have the bead. I just took the lanyard off. I untied it. But there are these cool beads that have like some sort of symbol related to the, element that is in this special edition series. So this one has like the Shirogorov logo with like wind around it, I guess. So this is the Northern Wind, or the Arum, and it is in LMAX, and it is a 111 and has some really cool little details. These are just dropped from Recon 1 a couple weeks ago. I ordered it when it dropped, and then have had it and have been waiting to do a video on it and carried it for a few days and just to get my thoughts on this knife. So first off, let's talk about the base thing that this is, and that's a 111. So if you're not familiar with the 111, it is the biggest knife that Shirogorov makes. The 111 refers to how big the blade is in millimeters, so 111 millimeters, which means that this is a very large knife. It's hard to get this across on camera, but I'll bring in some of my size comparison knives for that reason that I've used in the past. So this is a paramilitary 3 and this is a paramilitary 2. So a pretty significantly sized knife. Definitely I know that Metal Complex called this a pocket sword. I think that's a little bit unfair because it is actually carryable. But as far as length goes, it is a significant knife, but still very carryable. I wouldn't usually carry something that's 4¼ inches, just because of the pocket space it takes up. But this is not a small knife and not something that's probably legal to carry in a lot of cities. But that's just the 111 in general. I knew what I was getting into, and honestly, for the size, it's a really easy to EDC knife. So let's talk about some of the specific details to this particular knife and the special edition Arum. So all of the ones in this series I was just talking about come with a special carbon fiber handles. As you can see, this one is blue and white and gray, and it's a really cool pattern. It goes throughout the knife, and these handles are, solid carbon fiber. Really just lovely. And that means that you're going to get a specific pattern to your knife because these patterns aren't consistent through the whole slab. So basically your knife will have a fingerprint, if you will, slightly different than other knives. These are liner locks, by the way. All 111s are liner locks. So, and run on multi-row bearing system. So something particular to the F11 Arum is like the finishing on the pocket clip and backspacer. This is actually lovely finishing. I don't even know what this would be called, but it's like a high polish stone wash kind of. I'd love to see that more. It's different than the pivot hardware and the handle hardware. Bladezilla in his video about this brought up that he wished that matched the pocket clip and backspacer because it's such a cool finish. But this is just the standard proprietary stuff that Shirogorov uses. The other particular thing to the Arum is it's in LMAX. All of the different, you can see that stamped right there. All of the different knives in the series for the F3 were different steels, and the 2 in this series so far have been different steels, including M390, LMAX, S90, and there's one other, it might be Chromax. I don't remember right off the top of my head, but it's just kind of mixing it up for the series, making them special. And they definitely are. I very much like the way that this looks. It's unique to Shirogorov. I think that they do the special editions really well, because they do them often, but not too often. It's just a good balance of making collectability in your knives without having to do, brand new models all the time or updates all the time. Though they do have a pretty good pace on those things too. So with that, I want to bring in this new idea of carryability for knives, or an overall EDC score. I've been thinking about this for a while. I like to carry and use my knives. That's how I get joy out of them. Obviously, different knives are for different things. If I'm going to be, cutting wood and batoning, I'm not going to be, I don't baton my knives, to be clear, but if I'm going to be doing something rough on my property, I'm not going to grab something like this or something like my, Marfion custom in Damasteel. You got to use the right tool for the right job. But in general, there is like an EDC ability for a knife that's like just good for all around daily tasks. And I kind of wanted to bring that in to my series of, first impressions on knives and after carrying knives a little bit, because it really gives kind of some clarity around like my opinions on these knives. And obviously these scores are going to be related to my opinions solely. So if I think a knife doesn't have a good EDC score or something, it doesn't mean it doesn't for you. It's just my personal opinion, obviously. So for this knife, I had gone through and thought out, the different categories in the past for other knives and like what makes them a good EDC knife. So I'll explain each of the scores that I gave this. There are 3 categories. So first off is carryability. So carryability kind of applies to the general ability to carry this knife, and there are a bunch of factors that go into that. One of which is the size of the knife, actually the pocket clip, and how actually carryable it is in your day-to-day, like using it. Well, actually use is its own category, but just having it with you. And for this, I gave it a carryability score of 7. So these are all out of 10. So the reason I gave this a carryability score of 7, which is much higher than I usually give a knife this size, is because it has a great pocket clip. This is a really functional pocket clip, and I think it looks lovely. It's not too tight, and it goes into pants pretty easily. Also, the weight on this knife is it's under 5.5 ounces. I think maybe it's under 5 ounces. I don't remember exactly, but it's in the 4.5 to 5.25 ounce weight or area for weight, and that's really not a very heavy pocket knife, especially considering that it's got 4.25 inch blade. And then the final thing for that is kind of the pocket space that this takes up, and that's where it kind of lost points. So it's a 7 out of 10, which is actually above average and obviously pretty good. But because of the size of this knife, this is a one pocket or one item in your pocket knife. So if you look at the Para 2, which is notoriously very wide and not great for kind of pocket space, it hogs it up. This is about as wide as the Para 2. A little bit less, but about as wide as a Para 2 all the way through. And then that flipper tab obviously adds to that. So when I had this in my pocket, the other things in the same pocket, yes, I carry other things in my knife pocket. I just, I have too much stuff I need to carry or want to carry. Means that it kind of lost some points there. So next on as I cut myself on camera because of that great action, let's talk about that for a second. Really good action. I mean, it's not surprising with Shiro. It sounds great. The liner lock is really accessible, so you can't, it's easy to disengage, and your fingers aren't going to have any lock bar pressure because they can't, Okay, next is usability. So for usability, I gave this a 6. So, average usability would be a 5, but this, that's how I think of it. I'm not someone that thinks of these scales as 5 is bad. In my mind, 5 is average. So this is a little bit above average usability. So let's talk about why I gave it a 6. So the ergos are really good on this. They fit the hand really nicely. It's a pretty big, obviously I've already talked about this, it's a big knife, so it feels really comfortable in the hand, and it's just kind of a nice knife to use. The blade has, excellent utilitarian grind. It's kind of a drop point and, a pretty non-aggressive V grind. It's not any hollow grinding here, and there's nothing in the way of the path of cutting. So that makes it a very usable blade when cutting things because nothing gets in the way, and it's just generally a pretty basic blade shape. Where it loses points here, as in it's not excellent in my mind, it's just a little above average, is the size once again. So when using this knife, you just have so much blade that you're out here if you're cutting something, right? It's rare that you cut a box open and you're all the way in here, right? You're going to cut halfway through, or actually, like if you have one of those USPS small priority boxes, you would literally be like 1.5 times through the box. So basically your control point is it's very far away on this knife because of the size. So that, again, this is like a generalist rating system. So I gave it points for being really good, blade shape and comfortable in the hand, but it doesn't score super high on that usability just because of the blade size, because you're not going to have much control because you're all the way out here and there's not really choke up points. I mean, you can do this obviously, which is one of my favorite grips, but the size does kind of detract from that. And again, if you're cutting open really big things or, things like that, maybe that's not a problem. But for me, generally, the general usability is a little bit above average, but not greatly above average, which is abnormal for Shirogorov for me because most of their knives are some of the most EDC-able knives out there, in my opinion. Last on this list is maintainability. So EDCs for me, it's a three-headed dragon, obviously, or three-headed dog, whatever you want to call it, where I've got the carryability, the usability, and the maintainability. I think maintaining a knife is super important and honestly really impacts my desire to carry a knife. So if you think about like something with proprietary hardware, I think that proprietary hardware looks really good, and at a certain level of custom, I want to see proprietary hardware, right? Because I don't want to see a standard tie connectors thing like this, standard tie connector, buy it from the store or the tie connector website and just be able to slap it on there, because you see those on every knife. I want to see some, thought out or created hardware, but in the grand scheme of things, it makes things harder to maintain because either you need a special tool or you need to be able to make a tool, which is also rare. And some of these knife makers don't even offer tools for their knives. So with that being said, technically speaking, Shirogorov hardware is proprietary. And though, yes, you can take this apart with a screwdriver and all those things, or you can put tape on a screwdriver and take these apart. I think that having proprietary hardware inherently makes a knife harder to maintain, right? Especially if you're not providing that proprietary hardware to the individual when they purchase a knife, or providing a tool for purchase after the fact. And the Shirogorov tools are notoriously very difficult to find, right? Especially from the factory, and very expensive. Now, you could argue if you're buying knives in this price range, you should be shilling out for the tools. And you know what? I have shilled out for the tools because I have a bunch of Shirogorovs as I drop this. So I have some of my proprietary tools right here in my little tool holder thing, and I have those tools, right? So I can maintain these very easily, and that's fine. But I can't, in good conscience, give things with proprietary hardware that, even if you can take it apart, you might damage it here. With proprietary hardware, really good score on this because of that. And the other thing about these, and this is every Shirogorov, is that they have free rolling bearing systems, right? So there are cages for the bearings inside of each of these knives, but they're not captured in that cage. They're just held into place for the spinning. So when you take it apart, the bearings are, if you're not careful, the bearings will go everywhere. So the maintainability for those two things score poorly. And, you know, this is, again, all my personal opinion, but it is more difficult to maintain, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, each of these categories doesn't, if something scores low in one category, doesn't mean you shouldn't carry it. It's just something to keep in mind. So having free rolling bearings, it is the reason that Shiros are the action that they are known for. Really incredible, and they're famous for these free rolling bearings. But it does, you know, detract from the maintainability of the knife, because if you're not able to take apart the knife and clean it and stuff when it gets dirty, if you're EDCing it, you know, it affects how much you want to carry the knife, or if it's a pain in the ass to take apart. The other part of maintainability that is important is blade shape, because of sharpening. So I do sharpen my knives. I haven't sharpened this one, obviously. I don't sharpen them unless they need it, but this is a really easy blade shape to sharpen, so it would score high on that. Anyways, all that to be said, I think that this has a score of probably 4 on the maintainability, and only because of the, you know, proprietary hardware and loose bearings. The proprietary hardware, I feel like it can't be marked above average if it has proprietary hardware. Again, I know that this is simple to take apart with a screwdriver, but it can be difficult to not mar the hardware. So I have to give it a 4 for maintainability, and that's kind of the max you can do with proprietary hardware, because that takes into account, you know, the other things with like blade shape and things like that that make it easy to take apart. So that would give this a grand total of, let's see, so we said a 7 for carryability, or was it I think it was a 7 for carryability. I have it written down right here. 7 for carryability, a 6 for usability, and a 4 for maintainability. So that would give us a score of what, 13 plus 4, so 17. So hypothetically, a perfect score for a knife, like the perfect EDC knife, which I don't know that exists, but would be a 30. So I'd say, you know, the scores, just above average, right? Which makes total sense. Because average, if you got average scores across the board, it'd be 15, right? 5, 5, and 5. So this is a little bit above average on carryability. Ultimately, to me, for an EDC, this knife is kind of too big for carryability. For general carryability, if you had one knife, a 111 would be a kind of a badass knife just to have. But it's not a one knife does all knife. You know, it's not a generalist. It's a awesome, like, knife if you love big pocket swords, or you're just attracted to big knives. And you know, the details on this are just incredible. They did incredible work. The backspacer looks awesome with the milling, and it just fits perfectly. I love a full-length backspacer. There's little, you know, milling details throughout the handle. You can see those here. The jimping matches the number on the handle side milling. The pocket, or the lanyard hole, I think looks really good as well. It's a really incredible knife, and it's just very Shiro. The attention to detail is there. Everything is executed perfectly. I realize I've bled more as we've watched. But if it was going to be one knife, you know, in your collection, one knife to EDC, this probably wouldn't. You could do worse for sure. This is a little bit above average, but it's not the best knife out there to EDC. Anyways, let me know if you enjoyed that scoring system. I'll put them on the screen as they go through, and I'll show you the total at the end. But I just have been thinking about a good, you know, repeatable method to rate knives. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. This ended up just being kind of rambly, but here we are. I think the 111 is a sweet knife, and the 111 Arum is cool to have a special edition from Shiro. I'm happy that it is in my collection. Have a great day.